That looks better. Welcome to the channel. If you're here waiting, I will be starting at 7 o'clock. See you soon. everybody, and welcome to StashBlaster Quilts. I'm Maria, and I am here to help you make more quilts in less time with a lot less stress. So there's been a lot going on in the last couple of weeks that I'd like to share. And so one of the things is that I have been rearranging my studio, so things are a little bit weird right now. So behind me, this is the Twisted 4 patch that we've been working on, and I've only put half of it up, so I folded it so you can only see half. But because we're going to talk about this in a little bit. But I always do start with an organizational tip. So this time what I'd like to talk to is labels. But I'm not talking about quilting labels. Everybody talks about those. What I'm talking about are labeling things even on a temporary basis so you can find them later. Okay? Now, there's lots of different ways to do that. This is, for example, just a standard photo box. You could do the actual label that goes in here. But if you're only doing things temporarily, that could be a real pain. So what you can also do is just take a sheet of paper like this, write your information on it, put it over the edge, and then close up your box. Now, it's not the prettiest thing on the planet, but it'll save you hunting around trying to remember where you temporarily stored something. And then when you get everything all done, then you can do nice pretty labels for it, which you either print out on the computer, or you use a label maker, or something along those lines. I can't tell you how many times when I'm working with clients that we have boxes, and then they can't remember what they put in the box. So I also recommend when you have the flip fold type box, that you label not only the outside of the box, but the inside of the fold. So when the box is open like this, you can read here what's in it. So a house I was just in today, we have a whole bunch of boxes lined up, and one says things like living room books. So when she finds another book in her living room, she can just drop it right into the box. But there's paperwork, and there's things for other people, and that kind of stuff. And so each person or thing has a box. And since the flap is labeled, she can just fill those boxes up. And when I go back, we can go through, we can neaten things if we want to, or we can just close up that box and then wait till we have all of that category before we subdivide and do all of that. So please just think about labeling, even on a temporary basis. I will warn you that Post-it type notes, the sticky notes, tend to not stay on long term on their own. It never hurts to just run a quick piece of tape across it to make sure that that label is going to stay on the box or whatever it is you're putting it on. So I told you it's been busy. I actually had my leader and ender box run dry. That doesn't happen very often. I just haven't been able to do a lot of pre-sewing and things with everything else that's been going on. And so I spent a good chunk of time over the last few days just preparing a new box. These are all either twosies, because that's going to be the official name of a pair of squares that we want to turn into a 4-patch. So I just paired up my twosies. Some are paired with the exact same, and some are paired with different things. So it's kind of random in how it goes, so that I have a variety when I come over here to my drawer unit where I keep my 4 patches, and they'll all be there with a variety for me to choose from. There's also some things like we did a shirt challenge, and so these pieces were left over from my work shirt quilt. And so I'm sewing these together into blocks and strips, which will ultimately go into something. Okay? So I have refilled this, so I am ready to go at any time. I do pin them together, so like this. Can you see? Just for convenience sake. If you're just doing this in your own place, you could just lay them out, put them face to face, and just stack them, maybe, alternating directions. But given how much I move stuff around in here, especially now with the reorganization, I want to make sure that they're all pinned together and ready to go, which means I need to have a pin cushion handy to go ahead and plop them in whenever I'm ready. This is an old flower pot. And then I just made a little sand cushion for the top of it. And whenever I need to, I replace the cushion or even just recover it. You know, especially if you just put one over the top, even the way it is, nobody will ever know. So I do like having sand for my pin cushions because then it sharpens my needles as they go in. But that's just a personal preference, whatever you like. Okay, I'm going to put this down here. And then the tabletop camera died. It was getting fritzy. We know this. It is dead. So I have borrowed my son's camera because he does a webcam thing. And so I'm going to show you what else I've been up to the last 2 weeks. So I've been working on the underwater quilt. As you know, when I was doing this last time, none of this was done except for the top row. And what I've done is I've paired everything into triples, and then as they are sewn into their triples, they're going up on the wall. However, the bottom of the quilt, I had already started. So let's come down here. Because when I was first laying these out, I just wanted something to sew. And so I pulled some of the sand-colored stuff together, like right here. And so I've already pre-sewn some of these. But then I finished off the ones that were left over here, especially. And so from this little break you see here, the stuff down below is all in its triples or larger. And then that's it. That's coming along pretty well. I was actually quite pleased with how much I was able to get done in 2 weeks since I was last on with you. So this is obviously going to be a long-term project because once I have the triples together, then I have to make bigger things. Now, I do have, actually let me go back to this. These are all just pinned on the wall because I wanted to get it up to show you. But I had a friend over, and her comment to me as I was making the triples, because it takes around 45 seconds to pull the 3 pins and then clip the 3 pieces together to make sure that they're in the right orientation, and then put them down and then do the next one. She asked me why I didn't just do it by the numbers and put things together in pairs, and then put the pairs together in 4s. And so then I would have a diamond shape that would then go across the quilt. That's certainly doable. There's no reason you can't do that. I just like 3s because then I can do one longer seam around two bends that are next to each other, right? Whereas if you're doing a 4, actually it might be easier if I show you. Alright, here. I'm going to move this camera and I'm going to do it before I turn it on so that hopefully I don't make anybody seasick. Alright. Okay, now it's being difficult, which makes all the sense in the world. I was not designed for the tech life. Okay, for some reason this is not. Let me see what this looks like. Okay, so this is here. Alright, this is good enough. Okay, so this isn't the right number anymore. I do have a trash bag right off the edge of my table, which is very handy, but sometimes you have to double check it before you take out the trash to make sure that nothing has fallen in. Now these were mis-sewn, which is why I still have them. Sometimes I'm sewing super early in the day, like 2-3 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes I'm not. So these were mis-sewn, and so this is what my triple would look like. I could sew this orange one here, and then I would sew the blue on both sides to make my 3 seams instead of sewing each one separately. Okay. Now what she's saying is if I did 2 pairs, 1 and 2, right, I could then put them together and do a triple seam. Certainly doable. If you like this, go for it. Her thought was if I just took them down and put them in numerical order, I could consult my chart, which would show me the orientation of each piece so that I could make sure that I was sewing them together, and I wouldn't have to clip them at all. And that is 100% true. You could certainly do it that way. I didn't want to have to consult the chart every time I had a pair where one of them was a divided one, like these ones I just showed. But you could certainly do that, like up at the top where it's all solid hexagons. And so then they're just in numerical order. There's no reason you couldn't. So you might want to consider doing that. In which case, what I would recommend is that you string them in numerical order, and then you leave some extra string at the end, right? So that you can clip a little knot at the beginning, pull the next two, or however many you want to sew at that sitting, and then you could re-knot it and have the room to do that, so that if the giant snake of hexagons falls or gets confused, you're not sitting there trying to play number match. However, since they're all numbered anyway, that wouldn't be the world's worst situation. But I would probably string them row by row if it were me, because then I could just carry one row's worth with me and then go from there. So that's completely up to you. But I did make some pretty good progress on this week, so I was pretty happy about that. Now, I do have another hexagon project that I'm working on that I thought I would share with you. Let's see if we can make this work. So I need to make a name tag for my guild meeting. And so I have this hexagon flower. It's kind of hard to see. I've got the rose itself, and then over here I have a leaf. And so what I'm going to do is put it on a square like this. And then I'll have my name up here. So, name. Okay, there we go. I'm trying to make it so that it's right side up to you. So I'm going to put my name across here, my guild name here, and then I'll have this on there. Now, this uses hexagons that are different. The ones I'm using for the underwater quilt are just pieces of index cards and things like that I've printed out. This one, these 1/4-inch ones, use hexagons that I purchased. I'm going to just use this blue paper here so you can see it better. There we go. These are plastic, and they're a little bit thicker, so they're a little bit harder to manipulate, and in this size in particular. So what I did here was, instead of trying to do your standard basting stitch, which I don't think you can see on these, let me, hold on. The bin where I keep the ones that I'm going to be sewing next is right next to me here, so let me see if I can show you. Okay, so here, these are thread basted. So I put a knot, okay, and then I came up and I went through both parts. I looped back, came up, and then went to this one. Went down and up, looped back and around, okay? These are so tiny you can't do that. What I did is I went diagonally across. So I went flat, on this one it would be flat side to flat side, then flat side, then flat side. And then I knotted it off. So this is going to be a little bit more difficult. So what I did, I have one ready here to show you, but I just took it and I slit through all of those threads that were holding this in place, and then you can take your seam ripper and pull your hexagon out. And then this is all empty and ready to go. So what I'm planning on doing today while we chat is I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to remove this exterior row, and I'm going to baste it with this bright yellow as the pieces come out, because I want to refold this back down, and then I'm going to give it a good press. I can't press it with the plastic inside, because these little buggers here, they're going to melt. Okay, can you see it there? This would melt, and I don't want that to happen, so I could do this if this was paper, but I can't with the plastic. So I'm going to just go ahead, pop them out, baste it, and then I will press it over here on the pressing table next to my sewing machine. Okay? Let me come back here. Okay. Oh. Yeah, there I am. I'm zoomed in. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. You're welcome to work on your own projects while we do this. But I thought I would tell you about something that happened to me recently. Well, actually, not sort of recently and sort of ancient history. Um, when I was in college, I belonged to a group called the SCA, the Society for Creative Anachronism. And one of the costumers that I've been watching while I've been working. Oh, and for those of you who don't know, during the day I'm a professional organizer. So I'm often in the field, well, not like a literal field, but I'm also often out working with clients. So I'm not at my desk very much. So I don't get to YouTube a whole lot. But I was actually home and I was working in my office and I was listening to one of my YouTubers that I follow. And she's a costumer, and she also belongs to the SCA. And she was talking about, all this fun stuff that they were doing, and it reminded me. Once upon a time, I did what's called an illuminated scroll. If you think of the old-fashioned Bibles where they do the page of, with the pictures and all of that in there, when I was part of the SCA, I was asked to do a scroll, an illuminated scroll, a pretty important one, for one of our members. And he wasn't... Okay, this is kind of a weird group in that you have a kingdom and then you have subgroups underneath it, etc., etc. The nice thing about this is that everybody gets treated as if they were nobility. So nobody gets spit on or kicked or anything like that. Even if, like my husband, you are, in your character, a Russian peasant, people will still talk to you. Which, of course, they didn't really do a whole lot of back then. But anyway, of course, now he's a baron, it doesn't matter. However, so I had made this scroll, and I promise there is a quilting connection to this. Anyway, so I had made this scroll, and I had known that the recipient, his character was Japanese. So I did research, and I did this beautiful woman next to a lake with lotus blossoms in it, and lily pad kind of things, and I even wrote the English words as if it was Japanese, which is top to bottom, right to left, hand calligraphed, the whole 9 yards. And so I finished this project, and it must have taken me, a minimum of 100 and probably closer to 150 hours. I had gold leaf, which is really thinly hammered gold to the point where it's almost gossamer. You can pick it up and wave it. And so I had gold leafed it and the whole 9 yards. And so I watched him actually get the award. And so the king hands him the award, he says thank you, and immediately folded it, and then folded it, and then folded it, and folded it, and stuck it in a pocket. And my heart just dropped, because I had spent so long making it, and it was, he was glad to have gotten the recognition, but he didn't give two figs about the scroll, basically. And so he just treated it like trash. And it just, my like I said, my whole stomach just dropped. I felt horrible. Later on in the night, I saw him pull it out and show it to somebody and then just stuff it back in his pocket. I mean, it was devastating. And that can happen to anybody with anything that they make. But it happens a lot with us as quilters. The feeling on the scroll was kind of like when you find out that the wedding quilt that you make for someone winds up being in a dog bed. Okay? It happens. It's just one of those things that there's nothing you can do about it. You just have to be gracious and then just never give them another nice quilt again. And so with this guy, I was asked to make him another quilt because a lot of people who saw it before it was given to him thought it was really nice. I said no. I would never make another thing for him because I know it won't be appreciated. It's okay to say no. Sometimes we feel we don't have a choice, particularly if it's our children. who may be getting married and who are expecting a quilt, but you know that they're not going to treat it right. It's okay to buy them one. Is the way I look at it. Nobody deserves that much of our time if they're not, especially if they're not going to appreciate it. So I just wanted to point that out because sometimes it's easier if somebody gives you permission to say no. With a lot of my clients, they have to be told that it's okay to sell a gift. The way I put it is people can give you a gift, but they can't give you an obligation. Okay? So they cannot, in the giving, demand what you do with it. That you keep it, how you keep it, where you keep it. Now, I have had clients who tell me that they have mother-in-laws or other family members that do that. If the item that you have given them isn't on prominent display when you get there, then you will find it, you will inquire, etc., etc., etc. First of all, that's just wrong. Okay, let's start with that idea. But they can't make you put that stuff out. If it's one of those things where the family dynamic is more important to you, then go ahead and store it somewhere, and when you know that they're coming to stay or visit or whatever, put it out. But you don't have to live with something horrible just because somebody gave it to you. The way I've explained it is that unless somebody's a psychopath, people don't give gifts with the idea of making you miserable. Okay? People give gifts because they think you will enjoy them. And therefore, if you don't, it's okay to let it go. I'm not saying that you should call and say, oh, since you gave me such a stinky gift, I went ahead and donated it to the homeless because maybe they'll be able to put up with it. Okay, I'm not saying to be ungracious and not to thank them for the gift or whatever. Thank them for the gift because they thought about you enough to get you something, even if it's not your cup of tea. Okay? But then it's okay to regift it, to sell it, to donate it. Heck, if you want to, you can set it on fire as long as you do it safely. I have one friend, she was given a ton of china that was all mismatched through a will. Okay, it was, I believe, her great aunt's china. And she thanked the cousin who delivered it, and she was very grateful. And then she took it out back and she smashed it into 1,000,000 pieces and turned it into tiles for a mosaic and did a table for her back porch out of this old china, rather than serving meals on it, because that's not her lifestyle. I think she was given the set by the person that passed away with the idea that maybe she'd start to entertain like a real grown-up. But that's not who she is. She's an artist. And so she took them and she smushed them and then she gave them a new life. That's perfectly fine. If you want to take a ball peen hammer to it, that's great. If you want to take that mink coat and turn it into teddy bears, if you want to take old shirts and turn them into quilts, there's nothing wrong with that. So, I am hereby officially, in my position as a professional organizer, a certified professional organizer at that, I hereby give you permission. It is perfectly fine to regift or whatever. This also includes our quilting buddies. If you get something at a door prize that's not for you, it can go onto a free table, you can give it to somebody else. Nobody's going to mind. And that idea also came up this week, because as I'm starting this reorganization, I'm finding a bunch of stuff that I've picked up along the way, some of which has been very useful, and some of which I just hadn't decided what to do with yet. And so, in this process, I'm deciding what to do with it. And some of it is going to wind up back on the free table when the guild meets in September. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's perfectly fine. If somebody complains, then you can just tell them it just doesn't go, And I thought, or I tried it. I didn't much care for how it worked. There's nothing wrong with it. It just doesn't work for my style. And so I wanted to make sure somebody who could appreciate it would get a chance to use it. Particularly for those that don't have the money to go out and buy it for themselves just to try it. Things like specialty rulers are expensive. And, it's easy to spend $20-30 on one. And then if it doesn't work for you, if it doesn't work with how you like to do things, somebody would love to give it a try without having to fork over that money to find out if it works for them or not. So I really encourage often and heavy use of a free table for quilters. But, if it's a piece of furniture, put it out on the street with a free sign on it. Use Craigslist. Use, eBay. Sell the stuff, whatever. You do not have to keep it just because you were given it. Okay? So those are just a couple of things for this week. Number one, it's okay not to give people quilts. And number two, it's okay not to keep things that you don't want. Now, this can be a killer if you've given someone a quilt and they don't care for it, and so they give it away and you find out about it. But it's okay, all right? You have to let it go. But before I gave them another quilt, I would talk to them about it and find out why they didn't care for the one I first gave them. Maybe it's a quilt that was a fit at a different time in life. If I gave my son a graduation quilt and then now he's married, he doesn't have a twin bed anymore, he's married, and she's into all pinks and purples, but I did it all in grays and browns because, it was a masculine quilt and that's what he wanted. Yeah, better he should give it away than to throw it out or turn it into a dog bed, right? So sometimes you have to ask. So when you find out, what the problem was, then maybe it is worth it to go ahead and make them another quilt. But if you don't know, then you have more questions to ask. When I take a commission, for example, I've had people say, I had this one woman say to me, well, my 2 daughters are going to Alaska for a year, so I wanted to give each one a twin-size quilt to take with them. I'm like, well, that's kind of cool. What kind of quilt did you have in mind? And she said, I don't know, just come up with something. Okay. I don't know these girls at all. I've never met them. This was actually a woman who came to my house to sell me life insurance, and to do a review of our home and auto insurance. Scott loves this story because we did not buy any more insurance, but she commissioned 2 quilts from me. So, I had to talk a lot with her about this, and she was not the most communicative, so it was really hard. Even just getting down a pattern, and so it's really, really hard to work in the dark and then know that it's going to be appreciated. I don't know if those girls ever liked those quilts. I made 2 heart applique quilts. The mom liked that idea because she loves her daughters, and so she thought the hearts would be cute. Okay. I said, are your girls girly girls? Is it the kind of thing where they like hearts and unicorns and, that kind of stuff? Or are they tomboys who would rather have baseballs, or whatever? And she goes, no, they're regular girls. What does that mean? It's kind of like asking a quilter, what kind of a quilter are you? I'm just a regular quilter. Well, there's so many different ways of quilting and types of quilting to do, from ultra-modern, sleek, 3-dimensional, it's got spinners in it, made out of metal, whatever kind of quilts, and your traditional Civil War quilt. Or Amish quilt. So, it's a huge variety. And so, we need to make sure that we're honoring that And we're trying to give them something we'd like because we don't want to give them something that'll make them miserable because we're not psychopaths. So that's just my 2 cents on that I thought that I would share. It can be emotionally difficult. It really can. But, for some people, that means that they never take a commission on a quilt, and that's fine. Some do, some don't. I do, as long as there's not a short time frame, because with my business, I've told you here in the past, there's times that I've worked 80 hours a week just on the organizing side. That doesn't leave any time to be doing a commission quilt. That's one reason why that I haven't been able to get any editing done. But I have been told that some of you really do like seeing this and listening to me yammer. So I'm happy to do this twice a month. I just can't guarantee edit time. So I'm hoping that will change coming up in the future. Number one, because Scott's going to be able to do some stuff for me. And number two, I'm hoping to work with out in the field with clients a little bit less. Therefore, having more time to do speeches and to do the sewing. So hopefully, you're going to be here sometime when I'm just like, woohoo, I'm done. I actually had 20 hours to sew this week and that kind of stuff. And I've got videos up now and that kind of thing. I've taken a ton of videos. I have enough videos up there for probably 10 or 12 hours worth of content. It just all has to be edited first before it can actually go up. And so, that's just going to be one of those when I can get to it. Then you might have one whole week or something where every day you're seeing something new pop up. Or maybe it won't. I don't know. But that's the plan. Okay, just to kind of clue you in on where I am basting the 1/4-inch hexagons. And in just a second, I just want to finish this one hex. I'm not done by any stretch, but I am to the point where I've gotten all of the leaf. Oops, here we go. Let me see if you can. I'm trying to get this in a way so you can see it. Okay, so I've gotten the leaf here basted all the way around, so that when I press it, it stays in hexagon form. And I do have this first red one, and so I still have all the way around to go, but that's what I'll be working on, like I said, during the chattering part. So anyway, I'm assuming none of you are interested in actually watching my hands while I baste this. If I'm wrong, if you want to watch this, there are 2 of you actually on right now. It seems like most of my people watch at later times. But the 2 of you that are on now, if you'd like to actually have me turn it so that you can watch me do this, just let me know. I just know that sometimes watching people do things on the screen can start to make you seasick, as their hands are moving, but it's out of proportion to everything else. So I am happy to do whatever you would like. Oh, so for the Twisted 4 patch, the reason that I have this hanging up behind me is I am starting to put the backing together. And I mentioned this last time. I am not going to do a traditional one or a couple of piece battings. What I'm doing is I'm taking strips of fabric that I have, and I am simply sewing it into great long rows. And as long as the widths are all the same, it doesn't, on each row, it doesn't matter if they are different widths in each row. So I took the quilt and I measured it. It was, I have the measurements here, 48 by 72. Now, in order to have my backing be big enough, I want my backing to be 56 by 80, approximately. So, because we go for simple and quick here, the clear plastic deck that I have that surrounds the head of my machine has measurements on it from 0 to 18 inches. So what I did was I calculated how many of those 18 inches I needed and any extra, so that I can just quickly take the strip, lay it across the plastic, and just move it down and then see, is it long enough? I need it to be a minimum length. Maximum's not a problem. If it goes a little longer, it goes a little longer. So then what I'm going to do is, once I have enough strips across, then I'll sew all of those together. And once I have enough columns, let's call them columns, to go all the way across the quilt with enough length, then I'll sew the columns together, and then I'll have the back for my quilt, and then I'll go ahead and quilt. If it's your first time here, the Twisted 4 patch is a quilt that we have been kind of doing together. I asked the various people who watch to vote on what kind of quilt we did. I offered 4 options. Traditional, something modern 3D-ish. I forget what the 4th one was, but the 3rd one was to use up old UFOs. Not UFOs, excuse me, orphan blocks. And so this 4 patch is just to use up old 4 patches or hourglass blocks that you have. And then they were cut on a wonky angle and then sewn together, so that there wouldn't be a lot of seam matching and all of that. Because sometimes, with new quilters in particular, they want something that looks good, that doesn't take a whole lot of skill while they're getting to know their machine. And you know, these are easy blocks to make if you didn't have enough of them to start with. So that's why we're doing this particular one. But that's also why I'm not using a big backing, because I want to use up some of my scraps. These particular strips, I changed my mind. I used to keep strips, which is anything over 12.5 inches in my book. That's how I define a strip. I used to keep my strips in half-inch increments from 1 inch to 12.5. But I found that the longer strips weren't something I was using, because I tend to work in smaller sizes. People in my guild are shocked if I have, you know, something made with 6-inch squares, because that's just, you know, where's the alien pod kind of moment, right? So, so since I tend to do small stuff, those were just too large for me, and I wasn't using them. And the whole point of having a stash is to use it, not just to have it on the wall. Now, admittedly, my stash is huge. I have a ton of fabric, partially because this has been a weird year and I haven't had a lot of time to sew. And also because I do a lot of charity quilting, and so I want to have the stuff on hand when I am available to sew. And so I have yardage behind me and quarter yards, and then I have strips and blocks, you know, behind where you're sitting right now, so that if at 2 o'clock in the morning I can't sleep and I want to sew, it's all prepped and ready to go. There's nothing worse than cutting when you're tired. You will mess up, I can guarantee you that. And so that's when I do things like make the twosies and 4 patches and stuff like that, that I know I'll use sooner or later. But they're already pre-cut. So all I have to do is find 2 that I like together and sew them together. If there's 4 of them, then I'll probably sew, well, if there's 2 of each color, then I'll probably go ahead and sew the 2 pairs, because I do like having a lot of my 4 patches that match. So that's just a personal preference-y thing. Otherwise, I'll pick contrast, so light and dark, and ultimately that'll go with another light dark to make a 4 patch, and then it'll go into something. But I do corner beams, I do 4 patches, flying geese, half square triangles is big, but there's a reason for that. I don't know who it is in my guild, but somebody in my guild does a lot of stuff where they cut off corners. So they'll have paired up 2 fabrics, and then they sew it, and then they cut off the corner. And then they take all those triangles and they throw them in a bag, and they take it to the free table. I take all of those already made and paired triangles, and I sew them into half square triangles. Now when I sew my stuff, if I would have just cut off the triangles according to the pattern, if there is a pattern, I don't tend to do patterning well. I tend to take other people's patterns, and then I put my own twist on them. Now I write patterns, and they tend to be okay for people to follow, but then again, I won't make it the same way again the next time. So that's me. But what I would do is sew the original seam that I'm supposed to sew, and then I would sew over somewhere in the 1/2 inch range, between the 1/4 and the 1/2. I tend to prefer closer to the 1/2, but with my HSTs, I'm less concerned about that seam having the full 1/4 inch, to be honest with you. I know perfection is important, but since I'm going to wind up trimming it down to whatever size, the diagonal doesn't matter as much to me, because it's going to be in the right place when it gets put into the quilt. And I tend to quilt the living behemoths out of things, so it's going to be locked in, even if it only had an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. It's going to be locked in. Nothing's happening to that. So I will go as small as that, but I tend to prefer to go closer to the 1/2 inch. And so I have a ton of these things. Let me see if I can show you. Okay, so these are my orphan blocks, square in a square, 9 patches, flying geese. These 2 bins are all half square triangles. And then the 2 bottom bins, well, actually just this one is 4 patches. I've emptied the bottom because that's gone into into this quilt. That's where they came from. So I actually emptied a whole drawer. However, all these triangles show up, so I just go ahead and make the half square triangles. So I'm like, if she doesn't, and I don't think we have any guys in that guild chapter, so if whoever she is, she doesn't want to use them, I'll use them. But when I do my own, I go ahead and sew them, because then I don't have to match bias edges or anything like that, or pin them or do it at a separate thing. So I'll run my square through the first time, and cut everything apart, and then I'll run them through the second time, and then I cut them apart, so that they're locked and loaded and ready to go. So that's just how I am. It's a really efficient way to make them, and then they're ready. Oh, come on. This particular hexagon is arguing with me. It doesn't want to let go of its little plastic filler. And it's on the corner of the rows, so it's got 2 full sides, well, 3 full sides, that need to be folded back under and basted down, and so it's arguing. I am going to be going to Pittsburgh in a couple of weeks. I will be back just in time for this for the live stream on the first Wednesday of the month. So I am going to do it, but I will probably not have a lot to share other than information about the trip itself. So, as usual, I will do that. If I see anything architecturally interesting or inspirational or whatever, I'll let you know. And then I'm doing several remote classes, and then in September I'm going to Chicago. And I think I come back the day before the live stream after that trip too. So as far as I know, I'm not going to be missing any of these. If I am, I'll let you know. But in general, I think we're good. But again, that means less is going to get done. I'm actually driving to Pittsburgh and Chicago from Virginia, which is where I live. I'm taking the hubby with me. And so I'm actually reaching out right now to some quilt shops and things like that in the Chicago area, because what I'd love to do is, while I'm already there, go ahead and teach at maybe a quilt shop or two. Because I'm going anyway, I can do it less expensively to the shop than if they were paying my mileage to come up just directly and just for them. And so I'm reaching out. We'll see what happens. It is pretty late, I know that. But it's just the way it worked out with getting the approvals and all of that for the speeches that I'm giving. So, I can only do what I can do. Worst comes to worst, we'll have a pleasant drive. My husband will probably read to me a book while I drive. And then we'll get to see a little bit of Pittsburgh, and then we'll get to see a little bit of Chicago. So that'll be fun. So end of August is Pittsburgh, and end of September is Chicago. So at one point, when we lived in Buffalo, New York, my husband was working for a company that he knew was going to be relocating from Buffalo to California. And so, I'm sorry. I just saw Judy's sidebar comment. So I'll get to your answer in just a second, Judy. Where was I? Now I've lost it. Dang it. Okay. How do I get home from here? Let me see if... Let me look real quick here. I have the quilt in the other room, so I could probably show you. But I think I have... That's weird. Sorry. Let me just look this up real quick. Come on. My computer's not talking to me at the moment. I'll get back to this. Here we go. As I recall, this was all done with the same pattern. Yeah. The quilting is a pattern that Ormond Quilts did for me. She did the quilting. And it looks kind of like nested traffic circles. I think you should be able to see, if you look at the actual pattern, you can blow it up, you can see. Because it comes in and then it does like boxes this way that then overlap. Which I know is kind of confusing to those of you who haven't seen it. But this was just an all-over quilting pattern. Now, the geese on mine are three-dimensional. Had I decided to custom quilt it, what I would probably have done is just quilt the white parts so that the geese are still accessible, because you can reach in from both sides on that goose, like little pockets. And so I would probably have left the actual goose itself unquilted. But at the time, what I could afford was an overall pattern. So I really don't have a good place to set up for quilting here unless it's something really simple. So I've done several of my quilts by check, okay? But mine is the overall pattern, but I would recommend, Judy, especially if you're doing it yourself, if you could come in, let's say it's like a meander, come in and then take your meander right over the tip to do this side and then back. That would leave the geese three-dimensional. If you did a standard flying goose, then it's up to you whether you just want to go over it or not. But I kind of like with the ones that are 3D to be able to leave them 3D movable. So that's the answer I have for you. The quilt she's talking about is How Do I Get Home From Here? It's got, actually I have a couple of these blocks on the wall. I had, I'm going to go ahead and just grab one. I had a request for other sizes for the blocks, and so I've been working on them in my spare time, my copious spare time. So let me just go ahead and pull this. Actually, let me grab this too. Okay, so okay, so this is the block. Okay, so hopefully you can see. There's a little bit of a delay from my side of things, but this is the main block, and I set it wonky in the original pattern, and then there's flying geese that go all the way around. But the original size, I think, yeah, this is the original at the 12 and no, the original is at 9.5. That's this one. So I'm developing the 12.5, and then I really like these little 6.5-inch goobers here. Now what's cool is if you set them next to each other, because I have another one here, let me just unpin my note. Instead of setting them wonky, assuming of course that they're related, okay, so in this particular case this doesn't really help with the red and green, but you get kind of a spinning effect in the middle when they're next to each other. So that can be kind of fun. Now, in this particular case, this is a bad example. Because these are spinning two different directions. Do you see that? Okay, so one I sewed correctly and one I sewed incorrectly. And so that's why I sewed the other correct one. But if these were next to each other, then you get kind of an elongated cross in the middle that's also spinning, kind of like a hopscotch. So it's kind of a fun way to do it. I actually did a little mini quilt for that. I don't have that super handy. I'd have to leave the room and go into the other room. And there's some stuff in there right now from the reorganization. If you are interested, shoot me a note or leave me a comment, and I will dig that out for next time. Okay? If you want to write to me, it's mail@StashBlasterQuilts.com, and I do respond to comments, I respond to emails, and if you are having a good time watching this, please feel free to subscribe, hit the bell, like it. Liking is good. I would really appreciate that. I'm hoping at some point that this grows to a point where people are leaving more comments and we're doing more sharing. Excuse me. And then that we can get this to be a very friendly and welcoming and open place for people to come and share their problems with their quilts or something else. And then you can also ask me general organizing tips. I will answer those as well. But, I want this to be someplace that's a safe place to ask questions, and also just a place to sit and chat and have a good time with friends. So unfortunately, I can't do a lot of chit-chatty except through the chat box. So you guys don't get to talk out loud like you would like on a Zoom call, but I would like to have this be a little bit more dynamic of a place. So hopefully that'll happen. We've got about 5 minutes left, and I am not going to finish this rose basting during this today. I will have it basted and ironed before next time. And then what I was thinking is that I would go over how to applique these down so that you get nice clean edges. So if you're interested in that, again, shoot me a note, let me know. Some people, know more about applique than others, and some people don't want to know anything about it. Some people do. But in this particular case, I'm just going to applique the whole thing down onto the base material of my badge, my name tag, and I'm not going to bother cutting the back out. So you'll see what a mess the back of this is. Let me switch this over. Camera 3. Here we go. Oh, this other thing that shows me things in real time I can't see, so hold on. Let me just switch this because of the delay. Alright, let me bring this down here. So the back of this is just all icky. Okay? And some of it is just the basting threads that I haven't gotten completely out yet. But some of it is just loose stuff. So I could spend a lot of time trying to make this really pretty, but the way I see it is there's no point. This is going to be up against my base material like this, and then there'll be a backing on it, and nobody will ever know, so who cares? So it'll stay neater, and well, you'll know. So I guess I've just, outed myself here that I don't always have everything perfect. What a shock. That's one thing that new quilters are always worried about. What if it's not perfect? And my answer is, nobody cares. It doesn't have to be perfect. Okay? You're giving somebody a quilt. They should appreciate the fact that you spent the time, energy, and effort making it. And if it's not perfect, too bad. We do the best that we can, and we try to improve our skills all the time. But that doesn't mean that you can't give a quilt that has a mistake. It's quite likely you're the only one that'll know that there's a mistake there. I had one student who really messed up on her measurements on a quilt that she was making. And every single point ended at the edge of the block, which meant no room for seam allowance. Okay? And so she sewed it all together because she didn't have time, and she gave it to her son, and he thought that the points were supposed to be like that she had just made these really funky, trapezoidal stars, because he's a math geek, and all these little 4-pointed things. He had no idea how she'd done it. He thought it was amazing. So she knew it was a mistake, but he didn't know. And so this is supposed to be fun. This is supposed to reduce your stress, not add to it. Have a good time. I will see you the first and third Wednesdays of the month, 7 o'clock Eastern time. So it'll be a couple weeks, and then we'll be back. And I will have the rose ready to applique down. And I will have more of the hexagons for the underwater quilt sewn. And I don't know what other than that. I don't know how many hexagons. Doesn't matter. I'll be in Pittsburgh for part of this. But make this fun. Alright? Enjoy it, relax, and we can go on from there. Alright? Take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye. And you're more than welcome, Judy.